Nobody wins when the family feels.
So they fled the apartment. They did not call the police. So they claim that Paul pointed a firearm at his parents and they didn't call the police.
Never did. Never did.
Okay. When the police got there, right, they said they saw Chris inside the apartment face down with a knife in his back.
Mm-hmm.
What goes through your head when you hear that?
It was heartbreaking. It was to hear not only he was stabbed, to hear that my baby was shot in his face. He was shot in his neck. He was shot in his left side of his chest. To hear that Chris tried to run and leave out of the apartment, but Paul picked up a dumbbell and hit him in the back of his neck or his head. And the area where he was hit, the coroner said that it severed his spine.
Accused of murdering his friend told investigators last thing he remembers before the killing was getting high on mushrooms and making music with him.
Recently, a man was sentenced for killing his best friend, but he didn't just kill him. He overkilled him. You're talking about a man who was shot in the neck, stabbed in the back, literally, by his best friend. According to the police report, when they arrived on the scene, the knife was still in his back. Not to mention, you're talking about a man who, in attempts to flee, had a dumbbell thrown at the back of his head, causing a permanent dent. But this is a man who really grew up with his best friend. In fact, his mother and the victim mother knew each other. And in this video, we're going to have the opportunity to talk to the victim's mother, a woman who sat down with the family TV and talked about how she knew her son alleged killer, a man who she really didn't trust. We also gonna get the chance to hear her account of what happened, what she been hearing, and her reaction to the sentence. But before we go over this one, I want you guys to remember, I don't give you no angle, I just give you the story. So with that being said, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We're gonna jump right to it. Fam, this is Christopher McCurry, aka Chris, from Las Vegas, Nevada. He was an outgoing person, had 2 jobs, and loved to rap. 2023, he was only 20 years old when he decided to go visit his best friend. A little after 2 in the morning, after telling his mom he'll be back, that would be the last time she would see her son alive. Chris' best friend was identified as Paul Abercrombie. They knew each other since middle school. Now the exact date was March 12th, 2023. Paul lived on the 1300 block of 8th Street. Now this where we're going to have to wait to part 2 to know exactly what was done and said during the altercation between Paul and Chris. Because at this time, Paul mentioned that Chris tried to rob him, and in return, he acted in self-defense. But as we mentioned, he shot him, stabbed him, and threw workout equipment at his head. Now Paul didn't call police. Instead, he called his mother. She didn't call police right away neither. He called his mom and said he messed up. He was off shrooms, and someone tried to rob him, so he killed him. Paul's mother and her husband went to Paul's house, where the reports say they found blood on the steps nearby and blood all over the residence. Paul then pointed the firearm at his mother, and then they left. They did not call the police. The reports say they eventually took him to the hospital, and Paul was later arrested, March 14th, 2023. Paul told the staff that he ingested shrooms, and the last thing he remembered was making music with his friend, and that was it. Fast forward to July 2024, and after rejecting the first plea agreement, Paul decided to take the second, and was only sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. And now, fam, we hear from Chris' mom. Check it out.
Keontis McCurry.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're here today to shine light on your son's story, based out of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yes.
If you could briefly give us a rundown on why we're here today.
My son, Christopher McCurry, was murdered last March 12th, 2023 by his best friend. According to what he's been telling everyone, is he was high on shrooms and other drugs.
This incident happened, as you mentioned, in March of 2023. The man arrested named Paul Abercrombie. Okay, he was 21 years old, and you mentioned that it was your son's best friend, or one of them.
Yes.
Right. You mind telling me the relationship he had with Paul growing up, and how long did he know him, if you know?
Well, both my son and Paul went to a charter school, K through 12. So, everything was a very family oriented. So Christopher had met Paul back when he was probably approximately like 7th grade.
Okay. 7th grade. And so from the 7th grade up until then, they was real close.
Chris had many friends, but him and Paul was very close. That was just somebody Chris trusted, I know Chris, I'm so sorry. I know, Paul had some, mental illness, going on, and Chris would be there to, help him through, the hard times that he were having at home and, home life and, just day-to-day life. But, Chris had very, very many friends.
Right. Your son was also an aspiring rapper as well. The audience be able to see that. Now, there was some details I would like to go over with you as we run down on this story. One of them was being that Paul was seen at the University Medical Center with a gunshot wound to the face. How did you... Well, first and foremost, let's slow down. I'm sorry. When and where did you got the call that the unfortunate news with regards to your son?
There was no call. I'm a mother. I had Chris when I was 21. So, I was a kid myself. And so it was all, me and Chris would joke around all the time and say, we grew up together. That was my best friend. That was my everything. He seen me, throughout all my stages of life. I feel like he seen me in my 20s. He seen me in my 30s. He seen me in my 40s. So there was nothing that, you're so in sync with your children, as a mother. Like I said, initially when Paul FaceTimed Chris at about 2:45 a.m., I hadn't even went to sleep yet, which was so unlike me because I'm always tired. And he got a FaceTime from Paul, and he said, hey, Paul just FaceTimed me. I'm going to go over to Paul's house. Paul just wants to hang out for a little bit and make some music. And I looked at my time on my iPhone and I was like, no, absolutely not. I said, it is way too late. I'm like, you don't even, be out this late. Chris is typically in the bed by 9, no later than 10 a.m. because he starts his shift at 5 a.m. So he typically leaves the house about 4:15 in the morning to get to work. But that very next day, he didn't have to be at work. So he, I guess, felt like he could, hang out, Chris had 2 jobs and was in school. But no, I never received a phone call. However, it didn't sit well with me. And it was so crazy because I was having this whole discussion in my head. And I was like, I should just take his fucking car keys, I shouldn't let him go. I'm like, well, man, if I take his car keys, we're going to have an argument. It's going to be, he's going to tell me I'm treating him like a kid. And, he's 20 years old now. And he tells me I'm a hover mom and I need to let him, experience things on his own. And I said, no, if I take his keys, it's just going to be a big blow up and, he's going to be upset. And, so I was just like, okay, and he just left out my door, told me he loved me and he would be back shortly. So I fell asleep and, it was really odd because I kind of woke up frazzled. And I wish I could remember my dream, but I woke up and oh my God, where's Chris? And it was maybe about 8. I would look at my iPhone and it said 8:15 a.m. And I told my 10-year-old, because I seen him walking in my loft, and I said, well, he was 8 at the time. And I said, where's Chris? Go check Chris's room to see if he's, made it home. And he went and checked his room, and he said, no, Chris is not home. So I immediately started blowing up Chris's phone, blowing up, Paul's phone. Neither one are answering. And then I checked his location, and it still said he was over at Paul's house. And I immediately start, calling his girlfriend. And she said, no, I haven't heard from Chris, and then his girlfriend, contacted his other best friend. And he said, no, Chris left my house around 12, 12:30, because I was tired. And the last text message Chris made was at 4:30 a.m. And it was to his friend Nashik, and he said, no, that's the last time I heard from him. But his phone, because they all tracking each other, he said it looked like he's still at Paul's house. And we all met over at Paul's house. And by the time I got there, it was already, police everywhere. It was already, crime tape. And, I was on the crime scene for like 8 hours. I was completely ignored by the police. They didn't tell me anything. I didn't know what was going on. Only thing I know is from what I heard from the people in the apartment complexes. Someone was shot. Someone went to the hospital. And that was pretty much it.
Gotcha. Wow. How far did Paul live from you?
I would say about 20-something minutes.
20-something minutes.
And I thought it was odd because, where we live and where the school is, typically everybody lives within the same, 5 to 10 minutes radius from the school. And I never knew, that where he lived. I assumed he lived back where, we all live.
Was Paul a person who will always invite your son to his house?
No, that was the first time Chris was ever at his house. And I didn't never really, I had like a Kool-Aid house. So kids was always, from anytime him and Chris hung out, Paul always came to my house. And come to find out it was just because he was ashamed of where he lived, like the area of town where he lived.
Got you. And so it's some details that was mentioned. Of course, I just mentioned one before we slowed down a little bit, which was Paul had a gunshot wound to the face when he was later captured. Mm-hmm. He inflicted that on himself? Or
that's what I was told. I heard two different things. I'm not sure. I do know one thing. I just know Chris was a big dude. Chris would do anything to defend himself. But from what I was told, it was a gunshot wound he made to himself because Paul had always said that he wanted to kill himself. That was just something Paul would say constantly, that he wanted to kill himself. He didn't want to live in this world no more. He hated this life.
Yeah, so a witness had told investigators that Paul had called her and stating that he messed up. He was off shrooms. And someone had tried to rob him, so he killed him. What's going through your head when you hear that statement?
That's fucking utter complete bullshit. Chris was a manager at Dollar Loan Center. If he was going to steal anything from anybody, he had access to hundreds of thousands of dollars at his fingertips on a daily basis. It would take him over an hour to an hour and a half to count all the money before he left the office. And if I'm not mistaken, just a few weeks prior to this incident, he lent Paul money because Paul was not working. Chris had 2 jobs. Chris was not hard up for money. And if he was going to steal anything from anybody, why would he steal anything from somebody that's broke? I really honestly think it was just something that was said to make him look like it was a reason it was done. Not something out of malice or something that was unintentional. Just, it has to be a reason. Because the witness was his mother, Shannon Abercrombie. That was the witness. So a person will say anything to get their child out of any kind of trouble.
Right. So, okay, wow. That witness was the mom. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, yeah, because they go on and say that the witness and her husband.
Yes, sir, which was his stepfather.
Had left their house and drove to Paul's apartment. Okay, that makes sense. But the reports say they found blood on the steps nearby and blood all over the residence. Paul retrieved the firearm allegedly and pointed it at them. So they fled the apartment. They did not call the police. So they claim that Paul pointed a firearm at his parents and they didn't call the police.
Never did.
Okay. When the police got there,
right? They said they saw Chris inside the apartment face down with a knife in his back.
Mm-hmm.
What goes through your head when you hear that?
It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking because, you raise your kids as best as you can. And I used to tell Chris all the time, like, he was just too kind. So many things run through your mind. You think about, what was your child's last thought? What was your child's last feeling? To hear not only he was stabbed, to hear that my baby was shot in his face, he was shot in his neck, he was shot in his left side of his chest, to hear that Chris tried to run and leave out of the apartment, but Paul picked up a dumbbell and hit him in the back of his neck or his head. And the area where he was hit, the coroner said that it severed his spine. So Chris was paralyzed. So as Chris was laying on the floor and not able to move, Paul still continued to stab Chris in the back 8 times. And you can say what you want, but that, to me, that's rage. I don't fuck with you. I don't feel that this was done because you were high off of some drugs. And I do, from what I was heard, it wasn't just only shrooms. From what I was hearing, it was other drugs that Paul was on. I, later was told that he had dabbed into, meth and fentanyl. And, what he was on that day, I truly don't know. But to think that that's how my child spent the last moments of his life is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Because Chris was so sweet. He didn't have a mean bone in his body. It breaks my heart. It really does, because nobody deserves that. Nobody does. And to just leave him there. My baby was left in that apartment for 19 hours, dead, while him and his parents walked in and out of the apartment, getting rid of evidence, trying to clean up the crime scene. That's how my baby was left, on the floor, face down, with a knife in his back. That's how my baby spent his last moments.
And then you fast forward to just 4 to 5 months ago. Here, take your time, man. You need some time?
No, I'm good.
Okay. You realize this man accepted a plea that was given to him.
Initially, he denied the deal. And I pushed and pushed and pushed. And I said, I don't want a deal. I need to know, for me, what exactly happened. I need to know what happened, because Chris trusted him. At the end of the day, Chris did not have discernment. And I used to tell Chris all the time, like, not everybody is your friend just because, they smile in your face. Not everybody is kind like you. Not everybody has the heart that you have. And you got to understand that. You got to understand, when people are showing you weird shit, stop messing with them. And that's not the first time Paul would, Chris would say, like, yeah, I ain't, messing with Paul for a little while, he's being kind of weird. And he would go, a month without talking to Paul, and then they back best friends again. So it's like, I think Chris seen things, but Chris was too forgiving. He would always, somebody would do something, he's over it, and they're back friends again. But Chris trusted him, When all Chris's friends kept asking him, like, why do you hang with Paul? Like, Paul is weird. Like, this nigga's just weird. something off with him. He's like, no, that's just Paul. He misunderstood, he had a rough upbringing. That's what he would say, Out of all the friends, no one liked Paul. Not one soul in Chris's friend group liked Paul. And Paul met all of them all at the same time.
Paul continued to go with the narrative that he believed someone was going to rob him. And apparently authorities went with that to a degree, unfortunately. And like we mentioned, we will be, requesting the FOIA request. But also to find out he gets sentenced to 10 to 20 years.
10 to 25.
10 to 25 years. At this point, he's been in jail for 1.5 years.
Yep.
When you hear that sentencing, what goes through your head?
Disgust. Absolute disgust. Heartbreaking. My child would never finish college. He will never get into the career that he longed for. He'll never start a family. He'll never buy his first home. He'll never have kids. But Paul has every opportunity to get out and live his life, while my son never got a chance to even turn 21. That's all Chris talked about, is he couldn't wait till he turned 21. Chris was 2 months shy from turning 21. He would never get that opportunity. And it's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. He doesn't deserve to live. He doesn't deserve to, have an existence. He doesn't deserve it. He wasn't doing anything with his life prior to that. Chris kept trying to uplift him and, get him out of the slump he was in. And, if you want to dig yourself, you should have done it. Don't kill my child because you're depressed.
I know when you gave your impact statement, it was a lot of things that it seemed like it was cut off.
Oh, it was a lot. It was a lot.
If Paul had a chance to listen to this video, or anybody who care about him, what would you tell them?
It is not really what I would tell them. It's what I would ask him. I just want to know why. Why? Out of all the friends that he had, supposedly, why Chris? Chris never did nothing to him. Well, nobody wanted to be around Paul. Chris was. And everybody thought Paul was weird. Chris accepted him. Chris never judged him. Chris tried to help him. Just why? Why? It's not really something that I would like to tell him. I just want to know why. There's so many nights I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. Just because I know my baby didn't get a chance to fight. My baby was paralyzed. What can he do? All from somebody that he trusted.
Did you ever get a chance to speak to his parents?
No, I never did. Which I find very funny is because, like I said, Chris and Paul went to a K through 12 charter school. And so majority of the families have multiple siblings. And my niece, which I raised, Paul has a younger sister by the name of Dina. And Dina and my niece were best friends until she got, Dina got kicked out of the school because, she was just bad. She got into a lot of fights. She's very disrespectful. And it was instances her mother would call me and say, oh, Dina got jumped. And, you got time to call me for that. But you don't have the common courtesy to call and tell me, I'm so sorry, but my son harmed your son. My son killed your son. And instead, you tried to cover it up. You tried to get rid of my son's body. You got rid of evidence. She would not cooperate with the police for, I think it was like maybe 3, maybe 4 days. So it's hurtful. Everybody knows everybody in Vegas, and to hear, through people, because like I said, everyone knows everybody, to hear that she's making her son out to be a victim is disgusting. And I wish that she burned in hell. She's disgusting. To lie and say Chris had a criminal record. Chris has never been in trouble a day in his life, and anybody can pull that up. That's a public record. You could pull a person's criminal record up because Chris won't have one because it doesn't exist. To tell people that Paul had no choice but to harm him. Telling people that just to make her son look like, she don't want to be the mother of a person that kills people. To have her daughter Dina tell people not to tell other girls and that they mutually know not to hang with my niece. Something is mentally wrong with that family. When you look at people, it feel like it doesn't matter how long you think you know a person. You don't know a person. You do not know a person. You can see a person every day and you don't know that person. You don't know that person internally. You don't know their thoughts. You don't know their emotions. A person can look at you and smile in your face and literally stab you in the back. Literally.
You ain't lying about that. Knowing your son, let's wrap this up. Knowing he loved music. What is a great memory you think we can share with the audience that your son loved to do?
Chris was just so family oriented. Chris loved his family. That was just something he prided himself on. It was just almost like, even though Chris was my son, it was almost like Chris was my protector. It was just almost like, because he was a big dude, he was about 6'3", 6'4", 280. So he can hold his own. He just loved everybody. My fondest memory of Chris was, his 18th birthday. And I asked Chris, you're about to turn 18. How do you feel? What do you want for your birthday? And he says, Mom, I don't want anything for my birthday. He said, I'm going to take my paycheck and I'm going to buy everything that I need. And I'm going to make sandwiches and treats for the homeless. And I'm going to give food and water and treats to the homeless on my birthday.
Wow.
So it made me look at myself, like, if he can do this at 18, how come I'm not giving back to my community? Everything he did, it made me check myself. Because it was like he was so well beyond his years. Whatever age he was, he's never presented himself to be that age. He was always like, we would always say he's an old man, because he was always had to be in bed by 9 o'clock, He could never stay awake. But he was just so family oriented. He loved just being with his family. We would, have cook-offs in the kitchen. And, he never, ever walked in my house without giving me, a big hug, a big kiss on my cheek. You know, we would sit around and he would, because he always said I was old. He would try to ask me, what artists make this song and where's the artist from. It was, there was never a dull moment. It was never a dull moment. He was just so sweet. He was so funny. He was just so loving. Anything that he could do for someone, he would, and it's so crazy because I never realized how much Chris obligated himself to other people. I didn't find out until, a couple days after Chris died. And a couple of his close friends, came over with their grandparents, and they told me how much they loved Chris and how helpful he would come over their house and help them around the house. And he would pick, move heavy stuff for them and take them to the store. And my son never not once told me that. He never not once told me that he would go out of his way to take one of his friends' grandparents to the store to get grocery, or he went over their house to fix something or move furniture. He never not once told me that. Never not one time. One of his close friends' grandparents was like, yeah, Chris was supposed to be at my house tomorrow because he was going to help me with my yard. So to hear that, it hurt. Because it wasn't just him and I had a special connection. Chris made a special connection with a lot of people. He was just careless.
Man, I'm glad we could shine some light on Chris' story. Man, I can only imagine what you're going through, and I want to send love and prayers to you. Hopefully, when we do get the FOIA request, you'll be able to get some form of closure as well as to with him accepting a plea, his excuse, his reasoning. I think that's important, at least to this point. Is there anything else you would like to tell the people?
Anything else? And it's funny because I would see so many stories, and this is me calling myself out. I would see these stories and, you would see a teenager or a young Black man getting murdered. And, me, I would say, wow, how horrible would that be? What was that kid like, thinking that kid was, a kid that was in the streets. And this was for me to check myself. Not every kid that's murdered is a bad kid. Not every kid that's murdered was a kid that was about that life. So it was time. I checked myself.
That's deep. That's deep.
You just always have it spent like, oh, this kid was murdered by this kid. It was some kind of beef. It's not all the time. Sometimes a person is just not in the right place, in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's just so sad. It's just really sad. It's so careless that you just take someone's life for nothing. For what? For what? Anytime Paul wanted to kill himself, Chris was right there to encourage him.
I would like to ask you one question, one final question, and I'm so sorry. Now, for any other mother or father who lost a child, what is one advice you would give them?
One advice I would give them is just be strong. Just be strong. Be strong. Never, ever stop talking about your child. Keep your child alive. Whether it's writing letters, whether it's putting his pictures all around the house, whether it's speaking about him. Just never let his name die. Just keep speaking on him. Because he meant something to you. Because when people's life continue, it almost feels like they forget he existed. But you're still dealing with so much pain. And you still have to continue, and you have to put a smile on. Even though inside you're crushed. You're so broken. But you have to continue.
I thank you, man. I thank you for being so strong.
Thank you.
I thank you. We will be in touch. If there's anything I can do to help, please continue to feel free to reach out. I pray you heal even just an inch each and every day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
This interview touched me. This could be any one of our mothers. As we go to the end of this video, we do want to say once again, rest in peace, Chris. And love and condolences to his family. Per the request of Chris' mom, we did request a FOIA request, and we should get every file in the foreseeable future. And when we do so, fam, you know I'm gonna give you guys an update. But with all that being said, it's time for you guys to let me know how you guys feel about this one in the comments. This was the story of a Las Vegas, Nevada man whose life was cut short just 2 months before his 21st birthday by the hands of his best friend, a man who he trusted. As the mother said in the interview, everybody is not your friend. Let me know how you guys feel about this one in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until then, I'll catch you guys on the next one.